Hey everyone, my name is Jakara Lewis and I am the author of the Kids It series TEAS Math Edition, which is a math workbook that I created in order to better assist you guys in prepping for the math portion of your TEAS test. So just to give you guys a couple of deets, the book includes a diagnostic test, which was a gift that I gave to you all. You can find it located in the Files tab, and what it does is it helps you to gauge where you are in terms of content right now and how to guide your studying as you prep for your test. It also includes 2 full-length practice tests in order to help you to gauge where you are towards the end of your studying, so you know where you need to go back and clean up. The book also features over 1,400 practice questions, which I know is very essential, especially from my experience in the classroom as a math teacher. I know that you guys need tons and tons and tons of practice in order to be able to better retain certain topics. The topics can also be mastered in 1 to 3 steps. So I wanted to make sure that as I broke down each topic that you guys are expected to learn, I wanted to make sure that I did it in as few steps as possible so that it's easier for you to be able to maneuver through them. And I also grouped the topics into clusters based on how similar they are in terms of solving, so that it's easier for you to be able to retain. So for example, ratios, proportions, and percentages are all in one cluster because they're all interrelated, and the manner in which you solve them is very similar. So that's exactly why I did that. And of course, online resources are available as well. So what I am also working on is creating some digital content for you guys to be able to download in order to better assist you in practicing. So my first digital download will be available July 15th. That's going to feature 5 full-length practice tests with full question breakdowns in order to help you be able to prep as well, because the most important thing is to always gauge where you are in terms of content as you're studying, so you know which areas to focus on. So today we are going to look at a couple of questions from diagnostic tests. So last night I wrapped up my last video, which was forever, which was calculating geometric quantities. If you haven't had a chance to go check it out, make sure you guys double back and check out some of those good deets that I dropped in there. And that was the last topic in cluster 3. So now we're midway through all of our topics. So far we have covered 11 topics and we have 4 more topics to go. So we're going to go over the questions from the diagnostic test that will fall under cluster 3, which includes, let me see if I can memorize. Cluster 3 was explaining the relationship between 2 variables, evaluating information in tables, charts, and graphs using statistics, interpreting relevant information from tables, charts, and graphs, and calculating geometric quantities. So the questions that I'm going to go over today are going to be questions 17 through 24 from the diagnostic, which can be located on the File tab, and then we'll go from there. So we have 2 more clusters to do. Cluster 4 is going to feature operations with rational numbers. That's going to be our fractions, our decimals, our percentages. It's also going to be solving real world 1 or multi-step problems involving rational numbers. So the same idea, word problems with fractions, decimals, percentages. And then our last cluster is going to include our equations, and that'll be it. So as I go through, of course, if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to let me know. If I explain something and you still feel like you're a little lost in the sauce, let me know and I'll make sure I double back and I'll give it to you a different way. So again, we're going to be starting off with number 17 on the diagnostic test. So with the word problems, well, I guess I can write it out. I don't want to, but I'll give you guys a visual. All right, so it says a school. Well, I guess I'll write it, because when I try to write and read at the same time, I always stop like 20,000 times. So for those of you who are tuning in right now, how's your day going? Look, I can't even talk right. How's studying going so far? How much time are you guys actually devoting to studying at this point in time? And for those of you guys who have been studying, what are your expected test dates? How are you guys feeling at this particular moment in time? All right, so we look at number 17. Number 17 says, and of course we are looking at the diagnostic test that's located in the file tab. It says a school district studies the impact of teacher pay on job satisfaction. Identify the independent variable in the given scenario. So normally on your test, they'll put you in a situation where you have to kind of recognize either or. So they may ask you what the independent variable is in this case, or they may ask you what the dependent variable is. It just kind of depends on which test you get. So if we look at our keywords, first things first, what two things are we talking about? So it says the school district studies the impact of teacher pay on job satisfaction. So I know the two variables that I'm focusing on are teacher pay and job satisfaction. So I'm going to go ahead and underline those because I need to figure out what the relationship is between these two things. So we know that the independent variable and dependent variable are kind of going to be like cause and effect. The dependent variable is going to be dependent on the independent variable. So the independent variable is definitely what's going to cause a change in something, and that change is going to be measured in our dependent variable. So if you guys remember from my video where we talked about explaining the relationship between variables, I talked about the importance of keywords. So here they give us a really important keyword, which is impact. So impact of, when something impacts something, it changes it, right? It has an effect on it. So it says the impact of teacher pay on job satisfaction. So that means that teacher pay is affecting the satisfaction, which means that it has the ability to make it go up or go down. So because the pay impacts the satisfaction, the pay has to be our independent variable. And the satisfaction is dependent on that. So that's going to be our dependent variable. And that's how you guys have to be able to break it down. So in these situations, you have to ask yourself, well, what's changing? That's the thing that has always helped me with independent and dependent variable, because if I can assess what changes in a situation, I automatically know that's the dependent variable, which means the opposite of that has to be the independent variable. So one more time, it says the school district studies the impact of teacher pay on job satisfaction. Identify the independent variable in the given scenario. So we know that impact of is going to be a keyword for us that lets us know that whatever is having the impact, that's always going to be our independent variable because it's changing something else. In this sense, teacher pay is our independent variable because it's impacting job satisfaction, which means that satisfaction is going to change depending on how much a person is being paid. All right, so these are questions where you have to kind of think a little bit more. That's how I felt when I was putting together cluster 3, is I felt like a lot of the topics were more thinking. You had to think and you had to assess a lot of the situations, especially when we're dealing with tables and charts and graphs. They're giving you information, and along with doing some of the arithmetic, you guys are having to think critically. And I think that's the part that kind of gives people problems a little bit, is because they get so much in the groove of doing the arithmetic from clusters 1 to clusters 2, when it's time to mesh those together along with thinking critically, they kind of have a hard time. All right, so for number 18, we have a graph. I'm going to do a loose picture of the graph. It's not going to be like spot on because you guys have access to it in reference to the file. So just keep that in mind as I'm kind of sketching it out. I don't want to spend so much time drawing it. All right, so number 18 says, identify the type of correlation illustrated in the graph below. So when we talk about correlation, there are 3 different types of correlations that you guys have to be aware of, and that's going to be positive correlation, negative correlation, and zero correlation or no correlation. And it's just a matter of looking at the graph and recognizing which one is going to be representative of the different types of correlations. So in the book, of course, I include charts for you guys to be able to memorize, because there are going to be certain things in this test that have to be memorized that they won't give to you. So in this sense, if you're a person and you study and you understand the difference between the two, so we know that with positive correlation, Variables move in the same direction, so as one increases, the other increases, or as one decreases, the other decreases. With negative correlation, they move in opposite directions, so as one variable increases, the other one decreases. And then of course with no correlation or zero correlation, there's no relationship between them at all. So if we look at the graph, we're looking at GPA, and it's talking about the relationship between GPA and the number of hours spent playing video games. So as we notice, there's a downward curve or a downward trend of our data on our graph. So anytime our data has a trend and is declining from left to right, that's always going to be negative correlation, okay? And the easiest way that I can recommend that you guys learn this is just by memorizing. It's just by getting the graphs all and looking at the differences between them, so that you're able to understand negative correlation when you see it, positive when you see it, and no correlation when you see it. I always feel like questions like this are given because they're really easy content-wise, but you have to put that time in to study so that when you see it, you'll definitely know what's going on. All right, so we're going to look at question number 19. Let me double check to see if we have any questions or comments as I'm going. Nope, not yet. All right, cool. All right, so we're looking at number 19, which is another graph. I know people tend to have a really hard time with the graphs because they don't know how to read the graphs, or they may not understand how to pull the information out in terms of solving. And I always tell people that this is when those sub skills come back into play. Sub skills are going to be really important because these are the skills you guys are learning in clusters 1 and clusters 2, and then once we get to 3, 4, and 5, you're seeing how those are being applied. And that's going to be the most important thing. It's the same thing with the word problems. People always say, oh my God, I'm so horrible at word problems. But my first question to anybody who says that is, well, what type of word problem? Because you can have word problems with percentages, you can have word problems with rational numbers, you can have word problems with proportions. It's so many different ways that word problems can be presented to you. And I think that's the part that people tend to miss, is that they assume that they're bad at all word problems, when that's really not the case. All right, so I will write this out. So of course, for those of you who are watching, let's see, how much have you guys been studying so far? Like, how many hours a week on average are you guys devoting to studying? And don't be afraid to like comment. I know a lot of times people like watch, but they never comment or they never participate. But it's okay. Like, some people, maybe you haven't been studying as much as you should. It's okay, but we all have to start somewhere. But I'm really curious to know how much time you guys are devoting to studying. Just to kind of give you an idea. I always tell people, like, with this test, I personally think that when you first start out, you should be studying for at least an hour or 2 a day. And I say just an hour to start light. And you always want to start with the subject area that is your weakest, so that you have the most time to practice on it. Now, normally math is always the weakest, so you just start with that, and then you tend to roll the other subject areas into it as you go. And so here I'm gonna do the actual approximations that I got from it, instead of filling it all the way out, because I just don't want to draw all that. Honestly, it's just a lot. It's a lot to draw. But one thing I will recommend, though, is getting really good at approximating these graphs, because sometimes they won't give you guys the value, and then you have to kind of be able to guesstimate what the value of the bars are. And I think that's where people kind of miss the mark. It's because they're not estimating properly, and then that just throws their whole answer off. All right, so number 19 says, based on the graph, what percentage of the scholarships awarded were given to baseball players? So as you guys noticed with the diagnostic, I didn't give you guys these values. You would have had to guesstimate them on your own, but I just filled them in just for the sake of time and for the video. So for football, I guesstimated it, at about 18 because it's really close to 20. Basketball, I guesstimated at about 10, baseball 8, and then soccer 9. Now, sometimes our answers may vary, but they should be in the same ballpark. So if you got 17 or 19 for football, that's fine. If you got 9 or 11 for basketball, that's fine. And same thing with baseball and soccer, but you have to be in that same ballpark. If I got 18 for football, there's no reason why you should have 14 or 15 or 22 or 23 because that's way off. Okay, so you want to be within one, maybe two numbers of what the approximate value is. All right, so it says, what percentage of the scholarships awarded were given to baseball players? So that's two things I need to pull out. First of all, I need to figure out if I'm dealing with a percentage, your trigger should be, I know I have to create a fraction first because they've given me whole numbers, and the only way that I can go from whole numbers to a percentage is if I create a fraction, which is my sub skill, and go ahead and convert to a percentage. So the two things I'm dealing with are the total number of scholarships awarded, which we would have to calculate, and the number of baseball scholarships, which we know, which would be 8. So anytime we're dealing with fractions, the total number of what we're dealing with is always what's going to go on the bottom. So I know we have 8 baseball scholarships, and the total number of scholarships, total means we just add. And make sure you guys are utilizing those 4-function calculators because remember, under testing conditions, you are more likely to make a mistake. And I don't want you to get a question wrong because you didn't remember that 2 plus 5 was 7 and you put 6 instead, you know, because it can happen. It happens to me sometimes. So I just want to make sure that we are clear on utilizing the tools that they give us to aid us in passing. All right, so it's 45 altogether. So I know that I have 8 baseball scholarships that were given out of 45 total. So, excuse me, if I'm trying to figure out, or if I'm trying to calculate the percentage, I've already created my fraction. So we know in order to convert from a fraction to a percentage, which is going to be a sub-skill that's located in cluster 1, that's why it's so important to organize your study in the correct way. We're going to convert this to a decimal first by doing the top number divided by the bottom number. So 8 divided by 45 is what? I can't do anything with these now. That gave us 0.177777, but for the sake of this, we're just going to say 0.17. Oh, was that all right, and then we know to convert this to a percentage, we move it 2 places to the right, which is going to give us 17%. Now, based on the answer choices that I had 10%, 16%, 20%, and 26%. So, of course, in this instance, 16% would definitely be the closest answer. And that's what I want you guys to be able to recognize, that when we're guesstimating, which means it's not going to be exactly what they may have on the graph, as long as you guys are in that ballpark, then you'll be fine. So I love to have problems like this because I need you guys to be able to see that when we are approximating values and when we are estimating, it's not always going to be on the spot and on the money, but as long as you are in the ballpark. See, here we're only 1% off, and I did that purposely when I was creating the test because I needed you guys to understand that when you estimate, it's never going to be perfect. Because if everybody could do that, they would just give you the values. They wouldn't make it to where you had to exercise that particular skill, okay? All right. And of course, if you are having problems with this particular type of graph, which is the graph and the word problem in one, then that means you need to go back and you need to work on your solving real world problems involving percentages. You need to practice that, and it will be more in line with the percent proportions. That would be something that you would have to focus on. And I know a lot of you guys probably have a hard time understanding what to focus on because you guys aren't math people, you know, and that's not a skill, as I always say, I expect for everybody to have. I don't expect the average person to be able to pinpoint specifically which topics they need to focus on by themselves because it's not something that you utilize on a regular basis. All right, number 20. So as you guys can see, we're having to think a lot. We're having to use so many of our thinking skills. So as you guys are watching again, how much time are you guys spending studying? I'm really, really, really curious to know, because I think people have a really hard time organizing that habit. I was thinking about creating some type of template that you guys could use to help you to organize your studying. Because when I was doing tutoring, what we did was my students had a login chart, and they had to log every time. They had to log every single time they studied from start to finish so that we can evaluate it over time. And the reality was, when we assessed how much time they spent, the question was, do you think this is good enough for you to get the score that you need to pass? And this is where being honest with yourself comes into play, because most of the time the answer was no. No, I'm not devoting enough time. And I'm pretty sure for most of you guys, it's going to be the same thing. A lot of you guys probably aren't devoting. A lot of you guys probably aren't devoting enough time. And it's okay now if you're being honest with yourself, but what are you going to do to be able to change it? And that's going to be the biggest thing. Oh, that's what I wasn't doing that I did last week. Y'all have to forgive me because I have to get used to doing this. Writing the answer choices out so you guys can see them, so that I can circle them, because I remember somebody asked me about that. So remember, as I'm doing things, if you guys see me kind of making mistakes, or if I can do something better, just let me know as a recommendation, because of course I want to do what is in the best interest of those who have to learn it, of course, because I already know it. So sometimes I'm just moving and scatting and talking so much. The Gemini in me. I may not catch a mistake. I may not catch a mistake that I've made, but I'm okay with making mistakes because it makes me better. All right. So question number 20 says, which graph would best illustrate a state's graduation rates from the last 5 years? So remember what I told you guys when we were looking at interpreting relevant information from tables, charts, and graphs. You guys have to know, you guys have to be able to distinguish between the different types of graphs and what they are best used to illustrate. And that is something that's included in the book. That's not something that I see too often in too many books in which they kind of hone in on. But I know that that's something that you guys should focus on, because it's something that has been talked about on a number of occasions, with different students. So the key is understanding what's the situation with the graph they're trying to do. So it says, which one best illustrate a state's graduation rates from the last 5 years? So I know my trigger for me is going to be, okay, they're talking about graduation rates, and they're talking about illustrating them over the last 5 years. So that's something that happens over time. So the graphs that are best suited for things over time are always going to be line graphs. Line graphs are always going to be the best type of graphs to illustrate anything that happens over time. So our answer would be D. And the reason why I know this is because I've worked to build the background knowledge to distinguish between the different types of graphs. And that's what you guys are going to be expected to do, is you guys have to be able to distinguish between, oh, I didn't cut my light on. You guys have to be able to distinguish between the different types of graphs. So we know that histograms are going to be better when we're comparing different types of frequencies. We know that scatter plots are going to be better when we're trying to distinguish between relationships between variables. We know that pie charts are going to be better when we're talking about breaking things down in terms of percentages. And of course, line graphs are best when illustrating how things change over time. All right, and that's just something that you guys would have to be able to retain on your own. If you guys go back and check out my video on determining a relationship between two variables, then you guys will see the different tips and tricks that I gave you guys. The different tips and tricks that I gave you guys. I didn't even cut my light on. I wonder if you guys can see. Thank you guys for tuning in. Maybe that'll make it a little brighter for you guys. Alrighty. So we're moving into question number 21, and we're still using those critical thinking skills. So you guys are still having to have that hat on, and you have to know how to be able to shift between the two. Alrighty, so we're looking at question number 21. It says, which graph? Every time I try to like read it and talk at the same time, I just fail miserably. But that's gonna be something that I'm gonna work on. Which graph shape has a mean that is less than the median? All right, so it says, which graph shape has a mean that is less than a median? And our options are going to be skewed to the right, skewed to the left, uniform, or normal. And again, these are going to be things that you guys are going to have to learn and study so that you can memorize them in terms of the different types of graphs. So in this particular instance, the answer is B, right? I thought so. The answer is B, which is skewed to the left. The way that I memorize it is I know that skewed to the left is the same thing as a negative skew. And when I see the word less than, when they say that the mean is less than the median, less than, I just think negatively. And that's how I remember it's skewed to the left. So I know if I see greater than, I think positively, which is skewed to the right. So that's the way that I memorize it. But everybody has their own tips and tricks as to how to do it. But I definitely recommend that you guys get the tools. And if you go back and look at my video, which was, my video, which was evaluating information in tables, charts, and graphs using statistics, I showed you guys the difference between the skew to the left, skew to the right, uniform, and normal shape graph, because you guys have to know how to evaluate the shape of a distribution if they give you a graph. Okay, and I don't want you guys to miss out on a question like that just because you didn't take the time to study the topic. All right. And it's no real, I don't really know any shortcuts, honestly, to tell you guys about the ones that we have to think critically. It's just a matter of learning and memorizing and understanding and recognizing, really. Like flashcards. I know they have apps where you guys can make like electronic flashcards just for you to be able to study. I know one of them is Quizlet, like just so you can have something on hand. So even if you're like at work, or if you just have some downtime but not enough time to really focus on paper-based practice, those flashcards are always really good because it keeps your mind moving. It keeps your mind going. And that's the type of space you want to be in. You have to kind of make this the focal point of your life. And I think that's the part that a lot of people don't do really well at, is they wait until the last minute to do that. But if you know months in advance that this is something that's important to you, then just start out with devoting an hour a day, or increase it as you go, so that or a few hours a day, so that it won't catch you off guard. My commas are so ugly. All right, so question number 22 says, given the data set, which includes 2, 6, 8, 4, 6, and 10, they want you to calculate the mean. So, of course, this goes back to interpreting relevant information from tables, charts, and graphs using statistics. So, of course, you guys have to know mean, median, and mode at any given time. And the best way, again, to be able to understand it and recognize that is by practicing and practicing and practicing, so that when you see it, it automatically triggers. Because when I see mean, I know add them all up and divide by however many values I have. So I know I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values. So I know I'm going to be dividing something by 6. And if we add all these up using our nice calculator, again, make sure you guys are using this tool, especially for our basic arithmetic, because you are more likely to make a mistake under those conditions. All right, and the total of those is going to be 36. So we do 36 divided by 6, which we know is 6. So the answer is going to be A for number 22. And of course, anytime we talk about evaluating using statistics, you guys are just going to have to practice and practice and practice and practice and practice. And of course, the book features tons of practice. This was over 1,400 practice questions there for you guys to be able to properly prep, okay? And if you have not had a chance to go ahead and take the diagnostics, it is located in the Files tab, which is at the top of the page when you guys first log on, and you will see it at the top is files. If you don't see it, you just kind of have to scroll over, and it's there. If you haven't had a chance to check out some of the videos, you can either scroll through our timeline. I know I'm starting to post a little bit more, so maybe a little bit more difficult. But you can scroll through the timeline, or you can go to the albums tab, which is right next to the files tab, and all the videos are uploaded there to help you guys out. Alrighty. Moving on to number 23. So we only have 2 more questions, and these last 2 questions are going to focus on calculating geometric quantities. So the first couple of questions focus on determining a relationship between 2 variables. The next set focused on interpreting relevant information evaluating information in tables, charts, and graphs. And then our last few questions were based on evaluating the information in tables, charts, and graphs using statistics. It's so hard memorizing all this stuff. And then our last 2 questions are going to delve on calculating geometric quantities. So this is going to be our geometry portion for all my people who love to hate geometry. Good. Truth be told, though, geometry is the only math that I've ever taken that I hated. I took geometry in 9th grade, hated it. That was the first math class I ever got to be in, so I just didn't like it. I don't know if it was the teacher. I don't know, but I hated geometry. It just was not interesting. I'm an algebra person, so give me algebra all day, every day. I love doing a problem, and it takes up the entire math page. But those proofs and all that stuff, angles and all that, keep it. See, I'm good at math, but it's some math that I hate. So I know exactly how some of you guys feel when you see fractions and you see other stuff, because that's how I feel about geometry. I don't even like to tutor for geometry because that's how much I dislike it. But I have done it a couple times over the years, but that's not something that I say I'm really amazing at. I'm okay, but So trust me, I know exactly how you guys feel when you say I hate fractions. Now, when you guys say you hate math altogether, I'm not feeling that. Because it's not that bad. I really, really, really wish that I could teach everybody from when they're little, and I guarantee that they will love it. Because when you are younger, especially elementary, especially for my people who are studying, who are parents, and you guys have kids. If you guys have kids that are in elementary school, I want you guys to understand that, and it's just from my experience with tutoring and in the classroom. Their confidence in terms of education is built in elementary school, so it's either going to be made or it's going to be broken. And that's why a lot of kids hate certain things, because if they feel like they're not that great when they're younger, all that does every year is it builds on itself. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So as a parent, you have to understand that your role is just as important as the teacher's role, and that you have to play a really, really, really big part in their primary learning, because a lot of stuff that they're doing, you guys are familiar with. Oh my God, I wrote this so big. But just keep that in mind, though, because the primary level is super, super important when we talk about kids and self-esteem and education and all that. All right, it says, Anna's favorite box of cereal is larger than the average box with dimensions of 15 inches by 10 inches. What is the area of the box's space? So sometimes people read questions like this and they read too much into it because they think a box of cereal is 3-dimensional. And that means that I would have to do this, that, but you don't. Because the question specifically says, what's the area of the box's face, which is the front of the cereal box. And they give you the 2 dimensions, which is 15 by 10. So we know that normally, not even normally, well, we can say normally a cereal box is shaped like a rectangle. But even with the dimensions, because I have 2 different lengths, like one would be considered the length and one would be considered the width, I can automatically assume, in knowing the proper properties of the shapes, that this is a rectangle. And in order to find the area of a rectangle, I just do length times width. So that means I'm going to do 15 times 10. And you see how easy stuff like this can be, but people will overthink it. But you know what the sub skill was? Knowing your properties of rectangles and understanding that a rectangle always has two sides that are two different lengths. I knew when I seen 15 and when I saw 10, I knew specifically that because it has two different dimensions, it has to be a rectangle. All right, so we do 15 times 10, which is going to give us 150. We're talking about inches. Well, I'll just stop at 150 so we can assess the mistake that people tend to make. All right, so we know that 15 times 10 is going to be 150, right? So I can automatically take out D and I can take out A. Now, we have two different answers. It's 150 inches and it's 150 inches squared. So remember what I told you guys when we're dealing with area, it's always going to be squared, okay? In order for it to have been 150 inches, that would have had to been the perimeter, which is the distance around. So you guys got to be able to distinguish, because people will make that mistake and they may put you in a situation in your test, and I don't want you guys to miss it. And you see how long this problem is and how easy the work was? That's the trick with word problems, is that a lot of the times the math is so simple. But a lot of people can't get past the word, and they don't realize that you have the skills, you have the background knowledge to complete it, but you don't believe in yourself enough to be able to execute it. Which is really sucky, because I know there could be way more people who are like really, really great at math if they didn't have such high anxiety all the time. Like, you know? Just wish it was different. But you guys can always get better. It's always a chance you guys can get better. Because you know, when you guys get into nursing school, you guys have to do dimensional analysis, which is just like solving proportions. So I really would recommend that when you purchase the book, keep it. So when you do your dimensional analysis, the solving proportions will help you to be able to get through that. Because you guys have to be able to do that, I think, without a calculator. I believe so. I believe you guys have to. All right, and we are working on our last question. So of course, if you guys are just tuning in, we are going over questions 17 through 24 from our diagnostic test, which covers topics that are in cluster 3. And if you have not purchased the book so far, you can find the instructions located in the announcements tab. And they have the instructions for you there. This is, I'll just keep dropping stuff. Definitely the best product available in terms of prepping you for the math, because you get everything in one. You get good content and you get tons of practice. Tons of practice. I gave you guys more than enough practice. I gave you guys so much practice that you get tired looking at it like, oh my God, it's more. Like, yeah, it's more. Because I want to make sure that you do it so much that you don't forget it. So when you get to your test, you're like, oh, I've done this 1,000 times. Literally 1,000 times. That's how you have to study, though. When it comes to anything, though, you have to make sure that you're over prepared. But not over stress, though. I think that's another thing that people tend to misconceive, is that you have to be like over stressed. You don't. I mean, you could be nervous. That's normal. I get nervous sometimes. Not when I'm doing this, though, which is weird, because people are always like, how do you get on live and you're not nervous? I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm on here talking to myself. Sometimes I don't have any viewers. Sometimes I have a couple viewers. I've done my lives with my boutique and I've had tons of viewers. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why I like doing it. That's a good question. I don't mind. Some people are petrified of going live, which is like super weird to me. I don't know why. All right, now that I'm done, we on our last question. Hey, I'm excited. All right, so question number 24 says, Nick's Pizza Place is home to the city's largest pizza pie with an area of 85 square inches. What is the pie's radius? Round to the nearest 100. So I know, because they gave me a radius, that immediately lets me know that I'm dealing with a circle. So they give us the area of the circle, and we in turn are trying to find the radius. So remember, with our basic shapes, you guys are going to have to know the formulas. They're not going to give it to you guys. So the area of a circle is going to be pi r squared, where pi is 3.14. So we're going to plug in the values that we have. So it says the area is 85. So instead of my A, I'm going to put an 85 there. We know that pi is 3.14, and of course we're looking for the radius. So this, of course, is going to entail being able to solve equations. This is one thing that I tell people about the test, because it's multiple choice. If you're one of those people, and let's just say the sub-skill of solving equations is something that you never master and it's really hard for you, you can work backwards from your answer, because the only thing you would have to do is take each of the answers, plug them in for r, square it, and just multiply it times 3.14 to see if it gives you 85. I always tell people, like, it's half strategy, half content, because you have to go into the test with some type of strategy just in case some of the content leads you, because you're going to be nervous. You know, I don't expect a lot of people, I don't expect 90% of the people who take this test to go and take it and they know every single thing on the test. That's just not how these standardized tests are made. They're made for people not to pass them, honestly. So in knowing that, you have to go in there with some type of strategy, because at the end of studying, there may be some things that you didn't master, and that is okay, as long as it's not a lot. Maybe like 1 or 2 things, but it shouldn't be like 8 or 9 or 10. That's not good. But I'm going to solve it the traditional way. So I know that 3.14 and r squared are multiplied together. So when we do equations, which of course I have a video for later, we always do the opposite of that. We want to undo that, because that's what solving the equation is. I'm going to divide both sides by 3.14. Here they're going to cancel out. And if I do 85, I'll move it over. Well, no, I should really do it here. Well, no, I'll move it over. 85 divided by 3.14. That's going to give me 27.07 equals r squared. Some people are like, oh my god, that's one of the answers. So 27.02 is really close. But we still have an r squared. So in order for us to be able to get rid of this, we have to take the square root of it. So we have to take the square root of both sides. I don't think I can draw that upside down. That's ugly. Take the square root of both sides, and the square root of that is going to give us 5.20 is equal to r, which is going to be 8. All right, so here, this type of question was a little bit more difficult, because 1, you had to recognize that we were dealing with a circle. That's one thing. 2, you had to know your formula for the area of the circle. That's 2 things. That's 2. And 3, you will have to know how to solve an equation. So as you guys can see, it can become a little bit more critical at times, but a lot of the times you guys have the skills to be able to do it. You have to make sure you believe in yourself. So this video today covered questions 17 through 24 on the diagnostic test, which falls in line with cluster 3 from the book. It included 4 topics. We looked at determining the relationship between, or explaining the relationship between 2 variables, evaluating the information in tables, charts, and graphs using statistics, interpreting relevant information from tables, charts, and graphs, as well as calculating geometric quantities. So these questions that we completed today are examples of what you could see on your test. There are an array of examples that could fall in line, but that just gives you guys a general idea of what you could see. And as you see, the range of difficulty varies. Some questions are super easy, you should know when you get it. There are other questions like this that you have to have the background knowledge to be able to execute. So I will be moving into cluster 4, which is fractions. I've already done 2 videos on fractions, but I'm going to do 1 more for you guys, just so it goes in line with the examples that are in the book for cluster 4. And then after that, we'll move into the word problems, dealing with rational numbers, and our last one is going to be equations. Yeah. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll probably do another video tonight since it's Sunday. It's my down day. We'll get into those fractions. If you guys have any questions that you've seen as you've been practicing, you can inbox them to me and I can do a video specifically for that. And it'll be, I would post it on Wednesday, which is our wonderful Wednesday, where I devote that to questions that you guys have. So, of course, if you guys are practicing, send me the questions and I'll make sure to go do a live tutorial because it may help others as well. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are telling all of your friends, anybody that's studying your other groups, about this amazing group and these amazing videos that I do so that I can share with everybody. And I'll see y'all next time.